You guys, Shasta here for 107.7 The Bone. So excited to sit down with somebody I am fascinated with. Steve Gorman, former drummer of the Black Crowes, and most importantly, the guy who does the night show on 107.7 The Bone. Let's give it up, you guys.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here as well.
Is your tummy happy? We just had some really good food.
My tummy's happy.
Okay, good. Shout out to Hard Rock. They brought us some really yummy stuff. I had a good salad. What'd you have? You had sliders, right?
I had a small burger that had a giant onion ring affixed.
Oh, good. We're far apart right now.
And it was it was just the right amount. They know what they're doing. I looked at it. I was skeptical, but now I sit here a sated man.
Yeah, sated man.
Yes.
I love that. So a million things running through my head because this book, holy Lord. First of all, I have to say, let me fangirl out for a moment.
Okay.
The Black Crowes, one of my favorite bands of all time.
Thank you.
Truly, and I know you guys feel the same way, truly part of the fabric of the soundtrack of my life. Like if somebody said favorite bands, favorite songs, you guys would be on there. So thank you for what you've done. That's
thank you.
Your legacy, and we all appreciate it. So thank you for taking the time. So this
It's the
book,
most we could do.
yeah, literally.
Yes.
It's everything. So this book, Hard to Handle, The Life and Death of the Black Crowes. Why? Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, I think it's a great story, whether it involved me or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see it for what it was.
Yeah.
I think that there were a few things that really, if you go back 30 years from day one, everybody would say it was a shtick that was always around the band, which is, well, Steve, you'll have to write the book one day. I mean,
really?
and that's just a general, I can complete a sentence, and I have a linear train of thought, and I have a really good memory, which is a bit of a...
You do.
It's
We'll
a bit
get
of a
to
curse
that. It's
at times.
crazy, yeah.
But so it was just always there, and then I do write a lot just for myself, or if I write letters to people, and I've written short stories. I mean, there's just always going back to school. I was always a writer. Like I love to write.
Yeah.
So all added up to just this theme forever of you'd have to write the book if anyone's going to do it. But I never thought that would actually happen.
I'm sure they regret saying that as well.
And so, you know, when the band blew up, when it did, I always say we didn't break up, we broke down. When it finally was done, the last thing in a million years I would have thought made sense was to write a book because I just wanted it over and I just wanted to be away from it.
Of course.
And all of that. And there was a lot of, intellectually I'd put it all in a place where it made sense, but there's still a tremendous amount of anxiety and heartache and sadness and all the things that accompany a band that's a train wreck for that many years.
Right.
And so that's not something I wanted to delve into. In 2016, Eddie Harsch died, our original keyboardist, really
Phenomenal.
the keyboardist.
The keyboardist, yeah.
And in the aftermath of his death, I found myself not thinking about writing a book, but I just had this sense of it was all okay. Everything settled right where it should. It all made sense to me. I didn't feel angry. I felt two things about the band, and it was Ed's death that sort of brought this to be, I think. I felt overwhelming sense of gratitude and sadness concurrently. Like those are, and so, but the good news was, well, I'm not angry. It just is what it was. I have been angry in the past, and I know, you only know you're not pissed off anymore when you stop being pissed off. You're like, oh, I was still angry, but now I'm not. And there was a lot of, it's like all the dust settled and I could just see it with some distance. Like, oh, this is a fascinating story.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of frustration too. It always makes me sad that, Ed went literally to his grave without whatever his story was being told. I think I know a little bit of it, but no one knows what Ed's view of this was except Ed.
Yeah.
And no one's ever going to know. And that just bothered me. Not that I thought he would have written a book one day, but the fact was, there was no longer a chance for him to ever weigh in on anything or to share any part of his view of things. And with what I see as, and what's inarguably a lot of false narratives constantly being spun about what the band was from the beginning and all the way through, like all of these elements were just swirling in my subconscious. And it really came down to as simple as I wrote a eulogy for Ed for my old radio show, Steve Gorman Sports. And the day he died, I opened the show with like a 12-minute piece about Ed.
Wow.
And in writing that, I felt like this. I was like, well, I wrote for hours and I had to find 12 minutes of it.
Yeah.
And then I started a week later, I started writing some more and I was just doing it. But I was doing it. It was just I saw it at the time as this is just a processing exercise.
You're almost like journaling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so probably 6 or 8 months after it was the next summer. So it was 8 or 9 months later. All of these things had clearly been swirling in my subconscious. And one day I got up and just I looked at my wife and I went, I think I'm going to write a book. Wow. And of course she said, about what? I said, the band. And she said something like, you got a few other things to do around here, mister, first.
Right.
As Fred can attest.
Yeah.
And I but I just went, no, I really see it now. Like I just saw the entire arc, if you will.
Yeah.
And I saw the story for what it was and what it will always be in my head. Like it, without realizing it, like this thing had just, like a Tetris thing, it had all just locked into place. And I saw it and I thought, yeah, I think I'm going to do this. And it was just that simple. And, and so I started, and my buddy, Stephen Hayden, who helped me with the book, he's a great writer himself, and he had always said, if you ever want to write a book, let me know. And I called him one day, and I said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I'm going to write a book. And he was just, cool, just let me know what you need. And so it was, and he was great because he, having written before, I can write all day long, but I didn't know how to write a book.
Right,
I didn't know, like, wait, is there a rule book for this? Is there and he said, no, we just got to get in and figure it out. So he was sort of the... I say I wrote the songs, he produced the album.
Yeah, okay.
So before I started writing, we sat down and just went over, where do you think it should go? What are the narrative arcs? Like, what is important for you? What's the essence of what you're trying to say? And is it a history or is it just your personal memoir and all these kind of themes? Right. And so we just did a lot of what I called pre-production. We just talked about where the book would go. And we formatted the chapters. We built a roadmap together of just small phrases. Chapter 1's going to be...
I love the titles of the chapters.
That's the
hilarious.
last thing that came.
Oh,
those came
so
late.
Good.
Yeah,
So good.
we wrote the book and then went back and came up with those. So I said, we said like chapter 1 should be, okay, just you leave school and it gets you to here. And then, like we formatted chapters that had 36 words each, that bullet point, like little flags to chase.
Right.
And then we did that and we figured out what we wanted. And we knew that the book was going to be very light on the second act of the band. Just because for the purposes of the narrative, it's the same story, just repeated with some different members,
Which
ultimately.
is part of the problem. But
exactly. Yeah. It's just more hamster wheel life.
Right, yeah.
And so then I just went away and started writing. And so we had this little we did the Cliff Notes first, basically. And then I went and wrote the whole thing. And I wrote like 3 times what that is.
Oh, wow.
And the whole time, all I thought was, I'm leaving everything out. Like, it's just nowhere near enough. This is so much, which is, again, why that memory is a bit of a curse. But then when I turned it in to the publisher, they were thrilled. The guy said, this is great. I met the deadline. It had to be in on Halloween, and I sent it in on Halloween. And he's thrilled. And I got an email, and he said, this is great. I know you've been working so hard. Well done. And then he opened the file, and 10 minutes later, the email was like, what the F is wrong with you?
I need a third of
Why
this.
are you sending me this?
Yeah.
No one on earth needs 900 pages about anything, much less the Black Crowes.
It was the Tolkien version of the Black Crowes.
It was. And I was like, well, I didn't know it was going to be 900 pages. I just had to get it off my chest, And,
you went through therapy, really.
And then, of course, in a very Black Crowes way of thinking, my first response was, no, this is it.
F you.
900 pages of pure gold. There's no B-sides. They're all
edit?
great
What are you
songs.
talking about? Yeah.
So he said, take a minute, think about it. And I was a little getting hot under the collar. And he said, a really important thing about a book is if someone starts it, you want them to finish it. And I said, yeah, that's true. And he goes, have you ever recommended a book you didn't finish? And I said, nope. He goes, yeah, no one has. So that helped.
Yeah, of course.
And then I actually went to a bookstore in Nashville, and they had the wall of staff recommendations.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, and there was this one giant hardback, and it was like this big. And I was like, yeah, let's see. This is probably 2,000 pages, and it was 600 pages.
Oh, God.
I was like, oh. And I just put it on the shelf, and I literally called. I go, okay, we'll edit it.
Fine.
Okay. Yeah.
I have to say, you should definitely get the book because there's something about having a book in hand that's magical, and the pictures in here are glorious. But the Audible. Oh, Steve, he actually read the Audible, and that's a pet peeve of mine when an author doesn't read their own book. But to hear you tell these stories is just, it's a punch in the gut sometimes. It breaks your heart sometimes. It made me laugh out loud. I've spent many runs with you over the last few months with you in my ear, which is very surreal to sit in front of you and hear that voice. And also just to hear you throw out the F-bomb in such a fantastical way many times over.
Sure.
But it's really, you can hear the pissed off in your voice and the heartbreak. And, when you talk about, I don't want to run anything for anyone, but when you talk about stories like you were with the Robinson brothers when their dad passed away, like I'm getting choked up. Just listening to that. And that leads into the thought of like, people can throw around like bands break up or their business or whatever, but it really is a band of brothers. Like you go through everything together. And I don't mean the Robinson brothers. I mean, even outside of a brotherly love.
Sure.
You guys went through hell and back. I mean, 16 members, I think, total in the Black Crowes?
17.
17.
17 people that appeared on stage
right,
as a member of the Black Crowes, yes.
But I mean,
it was all said and done. Which, and as I say in the book, that's 10 more than it ever should have been.
And that's true, but how did you decide, like, to just go balls to the wall and go all in? I mean, you tell all the juicy stories, like you go all in.
I didn't see any reason to do it any other way. It didn't. I didn't realize there was an option. First of all, I think it was like because this is my story. Like I said, this is not an Encyclopedia Britannica. This is not the history of the band. This is my view. This is my story and how everything shook out to me, how it made me feel, and I'm just as much I point the finger at myself as much as anybody.
You do, and
my
I
own
appreciate
issues.
that.
Sure. I mean, it's not like a tell-all and it's not a hatchet job.
No.
This is a crazy thing
that
happened. And the good news is that there was at least some really great music that came from all this. Every band is a clown car.
Yeah.
That's a fact. There's just no getting around it. I mean, my favorite bands that I've ever known and hung out with, and I can love them all individually, but I look at them as a group and I go, they're just a train wreck in slow motion.
Yeah.
Because that's what bands are. That's just Zach and I were talking about it earlier. You get together as teenagers or guys in your early 20s, and then you look up and you're all 40. And despite anyone's individual efforts, as a group, none of you have matured, really. I mean, because it's just too difficult to. In
that way, like when you're on stage and drinking at night and partying.
Well,
there's
an entire 24/7 culture around every band. Every band that takes it seriously as a band. I know a lot of successful bands or rock groups or whatever that from day one, a band like Pearl Jam's a great example. Those guys were in other bands first.
Right.
They were on other record labels. The guy Stone and Jeff had several other bands before this thing became Pearl Jam. So they had a real perspective on what to do when their first record hit. Eddie Vedder had a little trouble with it, but the other guys, there were guys in the band that saw the business for what it was.
Right.
No one like that was ever in the Black Crowes.
You guys were kids.
We were kids, and we saw it as destiny, and we used to use stupid words like that, and those can get you really far. Blind faith in yourself is an incredibly powerful thing to a point, and you have to know when to get off that track and get on the track of reality. And we never had a clue as to how to do that. And I can sit there and say I was trying to, but I wasn't. And it's great to have. It's wonderful to be able to see a problem, but if you can't do a single thing to fix it, it's kind of pointless too.
Right.
All it does is make me crazy.
Right.
And that's all it did.
And it did.
It's like, looking back, it was real easy to see. There's a lot of times, and I talk in the book a lot about I was ready to leave for a long time.
For a long time, yeah.
And there always seemed to be a good reason not to, but eventually you get to the point where you're like, well, I can't keep looking for good reasons to stay. There's just one, it's not right. It's not me. My central nervous system is suffering. It's time to go somewhere else. But that's the way, and that's not just me. I'm the only one that said that in a book, but that's what everyone in the band felt like for years. And yet we were all there.
Yeah.
And so you can say there's magic there. And the truth is, on stage at night, a lot of our miscommunication, a lot of our problems, the only time it ever did make sense was when we were playing.
Yeah.
And that does lend itself to shows that you can go back and listen to and go, man, what zone were those guys in that night? And even I can hear that if I put on a gig. I'll be like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Listen to that band. But that can only go so far. There's got to be a time when it's like anybody else in any other field. It's in life. You got to grow. At some point, you got to grow up. You at least have to acknowledge that the field has changed. You can say it's the same game, but as a local band, you don't have anybody's. As a local band, there's no one it's real simple stuff. You don't have a payroll. You don't have guys who have families that work for you.
Depend on it.
And you're not responsible to them.
Right.
You're going to go out on tour for 10 months and you hire a crew and they all have families. We're supposed to be actually the band are the guys that are supposed to have it all together because you have 70 people that rely on you.
That's a lot of pressure.
And if you can't ever just wake up and acknowledge that and at least respect that, you got a lot of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was a little nervous in reading this book because, like I said, I'm such a huge, legit fan. And I have you guys on a pedestal. And I knew that there were going to be some stories in here I might not want to know. But the way the way you tell them is very, like you said, perspective. You know, it's your view of how things went down. And I love that you say if they write books, it'll probably be wildly different.
Yeah, of course.
Than,
it would be. Very
your
different.
Your
Well,
perspective.
we made a lot of mistakes, myself included. Everybody does, but no one wakes up and thinks, "How can I ruin my band today?"
Right.
It's not intentional.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a book about it is about loyalty and brotherhood and friendship and betrayal and addiction and codependency, and everybody in this room has some experience with every one of those things,
Right.
whether you know it or not.
Right.
And it's a family at the end of the day. And anybody if you have dealt with addiction, it's like contagious toxicity, and everybody struggles with it.
Yeah.
Especially when you don't know what it is, and then you're afraid to find out what it
And then
really
you
is.
don't get help with it.
And nobody gets help,
Right.
and everybody needs help.
Right. Exactly.
And so that's not unlike a lot of law firms and a lot of medical firms and
Right.
a lot of libraries.
It's a universal story.
It's all
It's the story of the Black Crowes, but
Right.
it's also very universal.
It's because it's about people.
Yeah. Also, I loved that you dove into other bands. Like you talked about Aerosmith and ZZ Top, and a lot of the conversation has to do with members of Led Zeppelin. Like you became very close, it sounds like, with Jimmy and Robert.
Yeah.
In fact, you guys, I'm going to spoil this one for you because it made me laugh out loud. I was running and I literally laughed out loud. He taught Jimmy Page how to nap before a gig. That
This
is
is true.
That is crazy. They actually nap together. Will you just tell that little tidbit? Because napping together is a very intimate moment to share. And the fact that you guys did that is hilarious.
The shoes never came off. Okay. Separate couches at an L shape.
But your heads
our
were
heads
kinda- yeah.
were at the same angle. We did a bunch of shows with Jimmy in '99 and 2000. And in 1999, the first show we played was at the Roseland in New York. We did 3 nights. And the first gig, I always take a nap before I get, about an hour before the show. I just have a 15-minute power nap.
Big napper. Totally
Always.
get it. Yep.
Just shut down.
Yep.
And then I wake up and I'm ready to go. And so the first night of the shows with Paige, I was in the dressing room and I'm in a chair not unlike this, and I just go like this and I'm out. It just happens.
Yeah.
And
Please
I
don't do
woke
that
up to to people laughing, and Jimmy was standing there looking at me like, and I heard him say like, "Did he nod off?" and my first thought was like, "Wow, Jimmy Page thinks I'm a junkie. This is weird." And, it's just like one of those moments. Like, wow. And he looked at me, and I go, "Hey, man." And Chris said like he does that every day. That's what he does. And he goes, "Yeah. How is that possible?" Because Jimmy's like a live wire. I mean, before show, as it gets closer to the showtime, he's like this. I mean, which blew our minds.
Yeah.
We were so jaded and cool. We're like, wow, he's really excited. And that in turn got us really excited. Actually,
Yeah.
it was incredibly contagious. But so he was just fascinated by the fact that an hour before show, I could close my eyes and take a nap.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it a few times. And then a week later, we're in Los Angeles. We do 2 nights at the Greek Theater. And the day of the second show, we'd been together for a few weeks, and we only did 6 gigs that first run, but we'd had a week of rehearsal and the shows, and everyone's getting along great. It was so much fun. I mean, just for me, it was the most fun I've ever had.
Yeah.
And we walked off stage after sound check, and he always had his own dressing room, and he comes up, he goes, "I was thinking about trying to take a nap today." and he was like,
That's how I feel every day when I get a nap.
Yeah. And
I get it.
I said, "Oh man, it's gonna be good for you. Trust me." And he said, "Well, if you're going to, I've got 2 sofas in my dressing room." And I was literally, I wanted to like curtsy and say, "Why, thank you, sir. Like I accept your invitation." And we walked into the dressing room, and I'm like, this is the single weirdest moment I will ever experience in my life.
You can't top that.
And we
ever.
laid down, and we just laid there, and he was like, "Yeah, so I thought last night was pretty good." And he just wanted to talk about the show, and we just chatted for a few minutes, and then I'm like, 90 seconds, man, I'm out. I mean, this is my routine. I'm ready, and I'm just gone. And then I slept for a while, like it was longer than the normal nap, like over 30 minutes. And I sat up, and I was like, "Oh man!" And I look over, and he is zonked. I mean, he's not in like REM sleep; he's in deep sleep, man. And I was like, "Man, look at him! All right." And then I'm thinking, this is the first time he's ever done this. This could be catastrophic.
Yeah,
Like,
no kidding. And all your fault.
Yeah. What if he walks on stage again? And I sat up and I just looked at him, and then obviously the energy in the room had changed, and he's a wizard, so he kind of stirred a little bit, and he was like, oh. And he said, well, we'll see how that does. And I said, you're going to be good, man. I'm going to set you free tonight, brother. We have a whole lap. And I walked out of the dressing room, and as I opened the door and step out, Rich and Chris from my band are walking down the hallway, and they look at me like, what are you doing in there? And I said, and I shut the door. I said, I was just taking a nap with Jim. And of course, they're like, what? They look at me like, what? And then we're just, I said, yeah, man, 2 couches. And the 3 of us are just laughing at. It's so absurd. It's
it's ridiculous.
And it's actually the most normal thing in the world, but it's
awkward.
And people say like that those dates, like, oh, it's a dream come true. It's like, I never thought to dream that. It's like,
nap
if
with
it had
Jimmy
occurred to
Page.
me to think, or just to even play with him, just to even do it. It didn't occur to me like, oh, we're going to go play Led Zeppelin songs with Page one day.
That's so far past anything you could even
It doesn't make
think.
sense to imagine. Why would that happen?
Right,
We're too busy being a crazily dysfunctional band.
Right.
Why would we get to go play 10 Years Gone with Jimmy Page?
And that was a theme for the Black Crowes, certainly. Like, you guys have an immense, stupid amount of talent, but you also ran into some really lucky breaks. And I, the people you met, the place you were at, you were actually in the industry at like the tail end of the record industry and how it was before it really transformed. And that was a
for
lucky
that matter,
break.
what rock radio was, and
exactly.
the way that every part of every spoke on the wheel of the music industry.
Right.
We caught the tail end of a great time to be a rock band.
Yeah. And I won't run this for you, but the reason Jimmy left that tour is worth buying this book. Because I literally, first of all, I was listening to it, and I dropped my phone because I was so surprised at what you said. And then I immediately texted my boss, Zach, because we've been bonding over this book for the last month. I'm like, holy shit, are you serious? That really, I was shocked.
Yeah.
So I won't run that, but trust me when I say
Hey, imagine my surprise.
It's a doozy. Oh, yeah. I can only imagine. It was a doozy. And then Robert Plant, he sort of became like your therapist in the Caribbean when you decided to like be done with the Black Crowes. He sort of helped
That sounds better than it is, actually.
I painted that one really nicely for you. But that's a crazy story, too, like how he helped you make that decision.
We opened for Robert on our first tour in 1990, and he always just took us under his wing. I mean, he was just always Uncle Bob to us. Yeah. And the funny thing is most of the great, people that have had 30, 40, 50-year careers, they're kind of those guys.
Yeah.
A few of them are not, but the majority of people that really stay around that long have a very generous spirit.
Yeah.
Even if they're a little neurotic or even if they're a little crazy, away from the stage and back, we had so many experiences of our heroes meeting us and literally saying like, hey, let me help you. Hang on. Let me try to keep you from doing what we did, or what, at the very least that, and even more so, sensing something's wrong and just letting you bitch and vent. And they'd sit there and listen and like, yeah, I've been there, man. I know, it's cool. You just keep going. Just lose yourself in the work and forget all that stuff. And we weren't very good at forgetting all that stuff, but we were certainly given great advice.
Yeah.
By, people, like I said, like by our heroes, by the people we looked up to the most. And Jimmy and Robert, it's funny, I never thought of it in those terms until I wrote the book. I was like, man, those guys in Led Zeppelin are a pretty big part of our lives.
They really are.
I just kind of forgot, like in a weird way, because you know them. I mean, it's like
you've napped with them.
I used to tell the joke all the time. You know what Jimmy calls me? Steve, because he knows me. We're friends. But it's if he walked in right now, it would be the most natural thing in the world. But then
it wouldn't for me. But
then when he left, I'd still go, man, that was cool.
That's Jimmy Page.
Because I'm still the guy that loves Led Zeppelin,
right.
And so that's still them, even though that's not them.
Right.
They're 40 years removed from that, but it's still them.
Yeah,
it's
an incredible story. What do you think the odds are that Chris and Rich have read this book?
They've had a lot of it read to them. I can, if I know anything, I know that they're aware of what's in there. I don't know that they've sat down and read it word for word.
Yeah. You ended in a real terrible fashion. I'm just going to say that in 2014. Super sad. Like for
It's the most embarrassing way a band could ever possibly end. That's how I saw it.
Yeah,
it's just, just horrific.
And I feel like I got a little bit of closure with this book. And I compartmentalize it. Like I would say, for Black Crowes fans who have been through all the ups and downs and all the ugly and the beautiful and all of it, like I have, compartmentalize it, still love the music, and you know what you know, and it is what it is. And
well, I mean, look, I don't mean this, I'm not trying to make this a joke. We're not Michael Jackson.
Right. Right.
I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of artists who've made great art who have lived truly deplorable, morality-busting, law-breaking lives.
Yeah.
None of that's in here. We just treated each other like shit.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, and if you can't, I've had people say like, I don't want to listen to music anymore, and I'm like, well, then all you're left with is that.
Yeah.
The reason that all made sense and that the reason everybody wanted to leave but couldn't was because we were making great music.
Well, you guys were,
and so that's the whole point. I mean, if you'd asked me in 1987, what do you want this band to be? I would have said two things. I want to have a world where we have each other's backs. Like I wanted a team. I did want that.
Yeah.
And we had that briefly, and then we never quite got it back.
Yeah.
But the other part of that would have been I want to be an all-time great band.
Yeah.
And so I think that from 91 to 97, I think we were as good a band as there was on the world.
I agree.
You know, for real. I really do. And that's just like, and I say it now after, that's 20 years ago, and I go, oh no, you put that next to any other band that was playing live, we're as good as anybody. And on our best night, we were untouchable. So it's all worth it. Like, you know, I mean,
of course.
If you could have shown me everything when I was 21 and said, are you still going to sign up? I would have been like, well, come on, you know. Yeah. I mean, if I were sitting here now and if my life was a mess and I were still trying to hold the band together and I were strung out or whatever, like so many people in rock bands are, I probably wouldn't say it was worth it. But you know, I'm good.
It's just like people who get divorced and they say the one thing we did right are our children. I feel like the one thing you did right was the music.
No, it's very true.
And we can still enjoy that, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Whenever they went back on the timeline was weird for this book. It was released in September? Mm-hmm. And then they almost immediately after that announced that they were getting back together. How was that whole transition for you? That had to have been a little funky.
Oh, I knew that was coming months and months and months
figured
earlier.
as much.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's
were
like
you
I don't
talk to about that?
I don't speak to either one of the brothers, but we still have a million mutual friends who feel the need to tell me everything they know that happens.
It's just like a bad breakup. Did you see who he's going out with?
It really is.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
like but no, I knew well, first of all, knowing that we all know each other really well. Mm-hmm. So I was just in watching peripherally what they've both done with their solo careers. This is an inevitability.
Yeah.
I would have bet my house 4 years ago that they were going to reunite as the Black Crowes without anybody else in the band. That was.
So you saw this train come along.
Oh, very much so.
Okay.
And it's and they continually paint themselves into corners, and there's only one solution. Mm-hmm. And by that, what I'm saying is they run out of money, they run out of future, they alienate promoters, they don't have the tools to build a successful, sustained solo career. So then they have to come back to the Black Crowes. Mm-hmm. And I heard an interview Chris did with Howard Stern a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago almost, maybe. And he was ripping on the Grateful Dead, the Dead now. And he tore John Mayer apart for who does he think he is or whatever. And he said, and he was accusing all the Grateful Dead people, which he loves the Dead, and he loves Jerry. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I used to say his shoulders smell like shit because his head's so far up it goes to Jerry Garcia's ass. But I like the Dead too, but I couldn't like them because he loved them too much. And what do I, you know, it's like you ruined the Dead for me. Thanks, man. Can I just be a Dead fan and not be obsessed and try to make us sound like them? But he did this whole attack on them for going back to the teat and going back, and he was talking to himself. Mm-hmm. And I know that. And I said that day, I went, oh, he's going to go back to Rich now because he's mad at himself because he's going to be there real soon and he knows it.
Right.
And that's exactly what it was.
Well, when you have lightning in a bottle like the Black Crowes, you're always going to want to come back to the well. And and I'm really happy for you. You've been doing Trigger Hippy for
off and on for
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah. So how is Trigger Hippy doing? It was
it's great.
Last October.
We put a record out. Yeah, just a few months ago, and it's great. I mean, it's fantastic.
I love the vibe of how it came together. Like, just you're all jamming. It was kind of members floating in and floating out. And
it's me and the bass player. Or have been there.
The two mainstays.
It was our thing. And for me, I mean, not by design, but it's funny to say. I mean, I can see it now. It's like I just wanted to be in a band where I could fire a singer. Yeah. That's really what it came down to. Pretty important.
Nicely done.
And so. No, but we put an album out in 2014, and that band fell in as part of just really loose. And then we got on the road, and Nick and I saw it as, well, this could be a full-time thing. This is legit.
Yeah.
And it was, but the other guys in the band, and it's not a knock on them at all to say they're not band people. Mm-hmm. It's Jackie and Joan they have their own careers, and they loved it and they were having fun, but it's not like they didn't want to do it. It's like asking a rugby player to play tennis. It's just different worlds.
Right.
And for all of the alchemy that makes a band real and the things you need chemistry-wise, that's not their game. And so we realized, like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, and Nick's the primary songwriter, so the drummer and the bass player are sitting here with a ton of great songs going, well, we need to find the rest of the band that wants to be in a band for real. And not that it's not about being in our band, it's finding guys that bring our needs to be 4 or 5 people, not just the 2 of us.
Right.
You know, in those terms, I'm very much a socialist. You know, like, we have to all have equal stakes for it to be real. You can't have a hired gun and this and that. You know, no, I want to, if we're going to go out and call something Trigger Hippy, let's have people that are all in the same, let's all be
on the same
it's a team.
page.
You know, it's a team. We have
yeah.
different roles, but we're all wearing the same jersey at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And, you know, when the Black Crowes had that early, we were hard to beat. And then it got staggered, and it was never, you know, after a certain point, you can't put that back together again. And so I'm fine to take Trigger Hippy really, really slowly as long as it's all moving in the same direction. And so that it's super rewarding. And I love the music. I love the people. And I'm proud of the record. I'm as proud of our new album as anything I've ever done.
That's awesome. You're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So good on you. And you're also hosting a radio show, Steve Gorman Rocks, 107.7 The Bone, nighttime.
Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah. Are you loving it? I mean, you had your sports show for a while, and then now you're doing.
No, I did. Sports talk was fun, but at some point I realized, like, wow, I'm kind of tired of talking about sports. I think I've run out of new ways to spin the same old story. You know, like. Okay.
Yeah. But you could live, eat, and breathe rock. I mean, that's who you are.
Yeah, no, it doesn't require nearly as much. Let me think about this. I can listen to a song and then start talking about it very easily. Yeah. It's the easiest thing I could possibly do.
Well, it's super cool to have you on our staff. It elevates me quite significantly. I'm on the same roster as Steve Gorman.
Well, thank you.
So this is kind of weird and ironic. Every interview I do with a rock star, I always end with the same question. It's strange because it comes from the movie Almost Famous, which I asked it to Rich Robinson. This is a true story. I interviewed Rich a few years ago, and I just blanked on the fact that he had a connection to Kate. Duh. And I was like, so, have you seen Almost Famous?
Right.
And he was like, yeah, I know that one. So that was awkward. But the question is great, and it's the last question of the movie, is what do you love about music?
I've seen Almost Famous, and I don't remember a thing about it. So
you don't?
I have no idea where this was
going.
What?
That's the question.
I've never seen a movie or a TV show about a band that I could tolerate on any level.
Really?
Yeah, they're all because Cameron Crowe's a fan.
He is,
and you can't. I'm not going to take seriously something a fan writes because, and not. That
You're the first person that's ever. I feel like I'm getting heated right now.
No, it's like you can't. If you want to do a show or a movie about a rock band and make it even remotely realistic, it's got to be like an absurdist comedy. You have to recognize. No, you have to, like I said, you've got to realize these are knuckleheads. They don't deserve your respect. What they do, the music. I have great reverence for music. I look at every band. I look at the guys in the Beatles and go, man, what a bunch. I mean, what must that have been like? I mean, it's all, to me, obviously, it's all been demystified, that stuff.
Right.
But the music hasn't. And
so elevate the music, not the people.
Trust the art, not the artist.
Ooh,
at all times.
Yeah.
And so. And I mean, and the Black Crowes is a really extreme example, I think. But like today, I mean, Aerosmith, 50 years into a career, Joey Kramer's suing the band to get back in to Aerosmith.
That's
They
disgusting.
bounced him because he had a shoulder injury, and now they don't want him back. 50 years.
Your whole life.
I can go put on Rocks tonight and rock out, and I'll go, what a bunch of idiots. Because that's what every band is, my own band especially.
Right.
I say in the book, we were great at driving right into the ditch. Like, give us a full tank of gas and wow. And and like I can sit here and present. I'm a fairly bright guy, and I've gotten a lot of things going and all this stuff. But in that context, I was just as big an idiot as anybody else. That's just the nature of bands.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot of REMs or U2s. Bands who at an early age stop and say, who are we really? And how do we want to present? And is there a distance? And if so, can we live with it? And how do we maintain that line of our sanity versus our public? U2, I'm amazed by them. I think they've had the best career of all time. I don't think there's a close second. Because they still put out records 40 years later and they still somehow matter.
Yeah.
When's the last time anyone cared about a Stones record? I mean, honestly, like
new
culturally
music
speaking.
I understand what
cultural,
you're
like in terms of people at Starbucks going, have you heard the new Stones? That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, and you two still, not, whether you still like the music or not the point. but they've understood so well, like the power of those four faces together. They're like IBM or Apple to me.
Yeah.
And
That
you know,
brand.
they understood that. And so whatever their internal dysfunction is, they recognize that's us, and that's not for the outside world to ever know about. And it's a credit to them. I mean, think about Neil Peart. That guy died and no one knew for 3 days. That tells me more about Rush than anything else. What respect they have for each other and for what they were as a band and for him as a man.
To give him the
When
privacy.
and the fact that he was sick for 3 years and no one knew.
Right.
That's all I could think when I heard that news. I was like, God bless those guys, man. They kept that so tight.
Yeah.
And that's impossible nowadays.
What is your life without music?
It doesn't exist.
That's what I
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because from the minute I got my first album, that's kind of all that's been in my head. You know, before I didn't start playing I started really late. But I was ready because I had just so obsessively lived inside my record player my whole life.
Me too.
Yeah.
I never learned to play. That's why I played on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I cannot tell you. I mean, I could literally talk to you for hours. I have questions about every chapter of this book. But you guys, I cannot tell you how great it is. Hard to handle the life and death of the Black Crowes. Buy the book, but also get the Audible. Man, hearing your voice tell those stories, incredible. Thank you for doing this.
Of
and
course.
Thank you for
very
your
much.
legacy of all your music. Really appreciate
Right on.
it.
Thanks.